started with a voice small, sharp, and utterly unexpected. A voice that sliced through the quiet hum of a corporate parking lot like a whisper from fate itself. No alarms, no warning signs, just a single command from the back seat of his own car. Shut up and don't say a word. Jonathan Miller didn't flinch, not outwardly, but inside everything froze. At 52 years old, Jonathan had built an empire from nothing. Miller Industries, his company, was worth $200 million. It wasn't handed to him, it was earned. Every dollar, every contract, every late night in the office had been a step forward in a journey that began with nothing but a dream and a stubborn refusal to give up. He was respected, feared even, in boardrooms, in investor meetings, in the cold calculus of business. Jonathan Miller was a name that carried weight. And yet here he was, standing beside his black BMW, key in hand, heart pounding, listening to a child's voice telling him to be silent. He peered into the dim interior of his car, and there she was, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, curled up in the back seat like a shadow. Her clothes were worn, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes were wide, alert, alive with something far beyond her years. Fear, yes, but also clarity, purpose. She wasn't running, she wasn't screaming. She was hiding, and she had something to say. Jonathan didn't call security. He didn't reach for his phone. He slid into the driver's seat slowly, carefully, as if afraid that any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment. The air inside the car felt thick, charged with something he couldn't name. The girl pointed, barely moving her finger, toward the towering office building behind him. "They're listening," she whispered. "Your partner and his blonde wife. They said you'd be here." A cold ripple ran down Jonathan's spine. Partner, Marcus Williams, the man he'd trusted for 15 years, the man who had stood beside him through bankruptcies, breakthroughs, losses, and victories, the man who had shaken his hand and called him brother more times than he could count, and blonde wife, Diana Foster, his executive assistant, the woman who knew his schedule better than he did, who remembered his coffee order, who called his mother on her birthday, who had once stayed up all night helping him prepare for a keynote speech when he was too sick to think straight. These were the people she was talking about. Jonathan's mind raced. "How did you get in here?" he asked, voice low. "The cleaning lady left the door open," the girl said simply. "I saw them talking upstairs, about you." Jonathan's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "What did they say?" She hesitated. Then, with a quiet precision that made the words land like stones, she said, "They said tomorrow you won't be the owner of anything anymore." The breath left Jonathan's lungs. Tomorrow, the day of the merger, the $400 million deal with Japanese investors, the culmination of 2 years of planning, negotiations, late-night revisions, and high-stakes diplomacy. The deal that was supposed to take Miller Industries to the next level. The deal that Marcus and Diana had organized from start to finish. And now, this child was telling him it was all a lie. "They said you're stupid," she continued, "that you'll sign papers without reading them, that the day after tomorrow you'll have to look for another job." Jonathan closed his eyes for a brief second, not in denial, in calculation, because the truth was he had been trusting them, completely, blindly, for years. He had let them handle the legal details, the financial reports, the board communications. He had focused on vision, on growth, on innovation, while they managed the machinery behind the scenes. And now someone was telling him it had all been a setup, but not just anyone, a child, a little girl with no reason to lie, no motive, no connection to him. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, turning to look at her. She met his gaze without flinching. "Because I know what it's like when people think you're invisible." And in that moment, Jonathan saw something in her he hadn't expected: dignity. Not pity, not fear, dignity. She went on. "They were talking about you like you were nothing, like you were dumb, like you didn't matter." Her voice grew firmer. "My grandma always said, when you see someone getting stepped on and you can help, you help, because next time it could be you." Jonathan felt something crack inside him, not anger, not yet, something deeper. A long-buried sense of justice stirring awake. He started the car. As he pulled out of the parking lot, the city lights blurred past the windshield. His mind was a storm, memories, suspicions, fragments of conversations that suddenly made sense. The way Marcus had pushed him to skip the legal review. The way Diana had insisted the documents were standard. The way they both had smiled at him lately, not with warmth, but with something that now looked dangerously close to amusement. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The girl, Jasmine, she had told him her name, was watching him, still tense, still alert. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Nowhere in particular," she said, shrugging. "Sometimes the shelter, sometimes the street, depends." Jonathan's chest tight. This child, this 7-year-old, had risked her safety to warn a man she didn't even know, because she believed it was the right thing to do. And in that moment, Jonathan made a decision. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to panic. He wasn't going to sign a single document tomorrow. No, he was going to fight, but not like they expected. Not with rage, not with noise, with silence, with precision. With the kind of quiet, relentless strategy that only a man who's built an empire can truly understand. Because betrayal doesn't just break trust, it reveals character. And Jonathan Miller was about to show everyone, Marcus, Diana, and even this brave little girl in his back seat, exactly who he really was. The man they had underestimated. The man who was about to take it all back. And maybe, just maybe, the man who was about to find something he hadn't realized he'd been missing all along. Family, not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by the kind of loyalty that doesn't come from contracts or titles, but from a child's whisper in the dark. The game had changed, and the real move hadn't even begun yet. The city unfolded around them as Jonathan drove, streetlights flickering like distant stars above the quiet hum of the engine. The world outside moved at its usual pace. Cars turning corners, people walking dogs, lights blinking on in apartments, but inside the car time had slowed. Every breath, every thought, every unspoken word carried weight. Jasmine hadn't moved from the back seat. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, eyes scanning the mirrors, her small frame tense like a coiled spring. She wasn't just afraid, she was aware. Jonathan pulled into a nearly empty diner at the edge of downtown. The kind of place that never closes, where the coffee is always hot, the vinyl booths cracked, and the waitresses know your name by the third visit. He parked, turned off the engine, and for a moment just sat there. "You hungry?" he asked, turning slightly. Jasmine nodded but didn't smile, not yet. Inside, the air smelled of grease and toast. A few night shift workers sat scattered across the room, buried in newspapers or half-empty mugs. Jonathan chose a booth in the back near the window where they could see anyone coming in. Old habits. Even in peace, his mind stayed in defense mode. When the waitress came by, Jasmine ordered a hamburger and fries. No hesitation. No "can I have," just a quiet, firm request. Jonathan ordered black coffee, though he had no intention of drinking it. His mind was too sharp, too focused to need a stimulant. As the food arrived, Jasmine didn't dive in. She looked at the plate, then at Jonathan as if waiting for permission. He gave a small nod, and then, like she hadn't eaten in days, she began. Jonathan watched her, not with pity, with recognition, because in her he saw something he hadn't seen in years: purity of intent, no hidden agenda, no manipulation. Just a child who had done what she believed was right, even when it meant risking everything. His phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "Ready for tomorrow, buddy. The Japanese are going to love our proposal. You're going to retire rich." Jonathan stared at the screen. The words were friendly, the tone warm, but beneath them, was something else. Smugness, triumph, the quiet glee of a predator who thinks the trap has already sprung. He showed the message to Jasmine. She chewed slowly, then swallowed. "He's got nerve," she said, her voice low. "Lying to your face and still pretending to be your friend." Jonathan almost laughed, almost. "Marcus has always been charming," he said quietly. "That's how he got people to trust him. That's how I trusted him." Another buzz, this time Diana. "Jonathan, I've reviewed the final contracts. Everything is perfect for signing. Trust me, as you always have." He didn't need to show this one to Jasmine. He could feel her eyes on him, watching his face, reading the shift in his expression like a seasoned observer. "Do they know things about you?" she asked, wiping ketchup from her fingers. They know everything, Jonathan said. Bank passwords, company accounts, where I keep sensitive documents, my schedule, my habits, my weaknesses. He paused. They've had 10 years to learn me. Jasmine tilted her head. But you've had 10 years to learn them right. Jonathan froze. The glass of water halfway to his lips stopped. And then slowly he set it down, because she was right. He had been watching, not with suspicion, not with paranoia, but with the quiet attention of a man who runs a company. He noticed pattern. He remembered details. He filed things away, conversations overheard, emails glimpsed, behaviors that didn't quite add up. Marcus slipping out of the office for lunch meetings that lasted 4 hours. Meetings with no record. Diana approving bonuses for herself through a subsidiary no one ever questioned. Late-night calls to numbers he didn't recognize. Files moved from secure folders. And once, just once, Jonathan had walked in on Marcus and Diana arguing in a closed office. He'd heard his name, seen the way they both froze when they noticed him. They'd laughed it off, said it was about budget cuts. Now he knew it was about him. Jasmine wiped her hands on her napkin and looked at him with those old soul eyes. They think you're stupid, she said, but you're not, are you? For the first time in what felt like years, Jonathan smiled. Not a polite smile, not a business smile, a real one. No, he said, I'm not. His phone rang. Marcus. Jonathan took a breath, smoothed his expression, and answered in the friendliest tone he could muster. Hey Marcus. Jonathan, I'm glad you picked up. Diana and I are still here wrapping up the last details. You resting up? Tomorrow going to be huge. Great, Jonathan said. Can't wait to see how it all unfolds. It'll be perfect, Marcus said, voice smooth as silk. Trust me, we've taken care of everything. All you have to do is show up and sign where Diana tells you. The arrogance, the certainty, it was almost beautiful in its audacity. They really thought he was a puppet, a figurehead, a sentimental fool who would sign his life away without a second thought. Jonathan ended the call and sat in silence for a long moment. Then he looked at Jasmine. You're planning something, she said. Your eyes look different. He didn't deny it. Yes, he said, I am. Every lie, every fake smile, every condescending pat on the back, it all made sense now. They hadn't just betrayed him, they had underestimated him, and that was their first mistake, because Jonathan Miller wasn't just a CEO, he was a strategist, and the best strategies aren't loud. They're silent, they're patient, they wait in the shadows until the moment is exactly right. That night he took Jasmine to his apartment, not the penthouse, not the showplace, a smaller place quieter away from the public eye. He found a blanket, set up the couch for her and watched as she curled up, still in her clothes, eyes finally closing. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat at his desk, staring at the city lights, mind racing. He needed help, not from lawyers, not from PR, from someone who knew the real story, someone who had been on the inside. Someone who had also been cast aside. Gabriel Torres, former police officer, former investigator for Miller Industries, fired a year ago, terminated, they called it, under the excuse of budget cuts. Jonathan had never bought it. Gabriel was too good, too thorough. He asked questions, he followed trails, and suddenly he was gone. Now it made sense. Marcus and Diana had removed a threat before it became one. Jonathan picked up the phone. Gabriel answered on the second ring. Voice rough, tired, but alert. Jonathan, what a surprise. Thought you forgotten about me after they cut me loose. I didn't, Jonathan said, and I know it wasn't my call. Silence, then a dry, knowing laugh. Figured as much. Marcus never liked people who looked too closely. I need you, Jonathan said, and I need you to know this isn't just about business. Go on. Jonathan told him everything, the girl, the warning, the betrayal. The $400 million merger that wasn't a merger at all, but a laundering scheme. Gabriel listened, no interruptions, no skepticism, just silence and the occasional sharp breath that told Jonathan he was being heard. When Jonathan finished, Gabriel said 2 words. I'm in. 2 hours later, Gabriel stood in Jonathan's kitchen, a worn leather briefcase in hand, eyes scanning the room like a man who had spent decades reading danger in silence. He looked at Jasmine, then at Jonathan. Oh, he said, voice low. This little girl uncovered a $200 million corporate conspiracy. Jasmine, half awake, took a bite of toast. My grandma always said when you have nothing, you learn to listen to everything. Gabriel smiled just slightly. Then he opened his briefcase. "While you were busy being saved," he said, "I was busy doing what I do best." He pulled out a tablet, and one by one the truth unfolded: spreadsheets, bank transfers, fake contracts, shell companies. For 2 years, Marcus and Diana had been siphoning money, over $5 million, through a web of fake clients and offshore accounts. The merger, it wasn't about growth, it was about cover. They needed Jonathan to sign off on retroactive transfers, documents that would make the theft legal, at least on paper. Once he signed, they'd remove him, take full control, and disappear with the money. And they'd done it before. Gabriel had evidence, records, testimonies from other victims, business owners Marcus and Diana had ruined in the past, then vanished from their lives like ghosts. This wasn't just betrayal, it was organized crime. Jonathan felt the anger rise, not hot, not explosive, but cold, deep, unshakable. They had stolen from the company he built with his own hands. They had used his trust as a weapon against him. They had laughed at him behind closed doors. And now they thought they had won. Gabriel looked at him. "You have two choices," he said. "Option 1, call the police now, try to prove it all in court, risk them walking on technicalities." He paused. "Or option 2, let them hang themselves. Walk into that meeting tomorrow like you're still the man they think you are. Let them celebrate, let them win in their minds, and then shut the door behind them." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "Option 2, he said. Jasmine, now fully awake, clapped her hands, once soft but full of excitement. "Like in the movies," she whispered. Gabriel nodded. "Exactly, and when they're standing there, smiling, thinking it's over, you take it all back." Jonathan's phone buzzed again. "Diana. Jonathan, you're the best boss a girl could ask for. After today, I'm sure our partnership will last forever." He read it, then he deleted it. No reply, because words were no longer necessary. The game had changed, and tomorrow the hunter would become the hunted. But there was one more piece, one more risk: Jasmine. She had already done the impossible, but Jonathan needed more. He turned to her. "I need your help," he said. "Can you go back there tomorrow? Listen to their conversations, record them." She didn't flinch. "That's dangerous." "I know," Jonathan said, "which is why Gabriel will be watching you the whole time. You won't be alone." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." Gabriel pulled out a small recorder. "This is voice activated. Just keep it in your pocket. Don't say anything. Just listen." Jasmine took it, held it like a secret. And in that moment, Jonathan saw it, not just a child helping a stranger, but a partner, a warrior, a girl who had already changed the course of his life. That night, as Jasmine slept on the couch and Gabriel reviewed the evidence in the next room, Jonathan stood by the window and looked out at the city. He thought about the man he had been that morning, confident, successful, blind. And he thought about the man he was becoming, awake, aware, and ready. Marcus and Diana had spent 2 years building their trap. What they didn't know was that in a single night, a 7-year-old girl had handed Jonathan the key to turn that trap into their own prison. Tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. the meeting would begin, and at 2:05 their world would end. The morning light crept through the blinds like a slow revelation. Jonathan stood by the window, fully dressed, tie perfectly knotted, coffee untouched on the counter. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't even angry anymore. What he felt was something deeper: clarity, the kind that comes not from rage but from purpose. Behind him, Jasmine stirred on the couch, rubbing her eyes as if waking from a dream she wasn't sure had ended. Gabriel was already at the table, reviewing files, his hands moving with the quiet precision of a man who had spent years untangling lies. "Ready?" Jonathan asked, turning to her. Jasmine sat up, pulled her small backpack over her shoulders, and nodded. No hesitation, no fear, just focus. Gabriel handed her the voice recorder again. "Remember," he said, "you go in like you belong, you stay quiet, you listen. And if anything feels wrong, anything, you leave, no heroics." She looked at him. "I know." Then she looked at Jonathan. "You're going to be okay, right?" He smiled. Not the fake, polished smile he used in boardroom. This one was real, warm, human. "I am now," he said, because she had given him more than a warning. She had given him back himself, the man who fought, the man who protected what was his, the man who remembered what it meant to do something, not just be something. By 1:30 p.m. the conference room at Miller Industries was set, polished table, crystal water glasses, projector aligned. The Japanese investors were due at 2:00. Marcus and Diana were already there, moving with the calm confidence of people who believed the game was already won. Marcus in a tailored suit, smiling at his reflection in the glass. Diana in a sleek black dress, placing yellow post-its on the contract pages. Sign here, initial here, don't worry about the rest. They laughed, softly, privately. They thought they were alone, but they weren't. Hidden in the hallway, just outside the boardroom, Jasmine crouched behind a potted plant, the recorder in her pocket, her breath steady. Gabriel was 2 floors down in a security van, monitoring the feed, earpiece in, eyes locked on the live camera feed. And Jonathan, he was walking through the front doors at exactly 2:00 p.m., calm, composed, smiling as if he had no idea his world had already been rewritten. "Jonathan," Marcus said, stepping forward with arms open. "Glad you're here, everything's perfect. The Japanese are on their way." Diana joined him, holding out the leather briefcase like an offering. "Boss, just sign where I marked, trust me as you always have." The words were syrup, sweet, poisonous. Jonathan stepped forward, placed his briefcase on the table and smiled. "Of course," he said, "but before I do I want to show you something." He opened his laptop, connected it to the projector, and with a single click the screen lit up, not with the merger documents, with evidence, spreadsheets, bank transfers, dates, amounts. $5.3 million, embezzled, siphoned, stolen. Diana's smile faltered. "Jonathan, what is this? 2 years of theft," he said, voice calm. 15 fake clients, 17 shell companies, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, all linked to you." Marcus stood up. "This is private information. Where did you get this?" "From someone who was watching," Jonathan said, and then the door opened. Gabriel stepped in, followed by 2 federal investigators in dark suits. Marcus and Diana froze. "Gabriel," Marcus said, voice cracking. "You don't work here anymore." "I do," Gabriel said, "just not for you." Jonathan clicked again. Photographs filled the screen. Marcus entering a private bank in the Bahamas. Signed documents with forged signature. Emails between Marcus and Diana discussing how to neutralize Jonathan after the merger. Then recordings. Diana's voice clear as glass. "Jonathan is a sentimental idiot. The day after tomorrow, he'll have to look for another job. That clown will never know what hit him." Marcus's voice next. 15 years pretending to be friends with that imbecile. It'll be worth every second when I see his face when he finds out he's lost everything. Diana's hands trembled. Marcus turned red. "This is a setup," he shouted. "No," Jonathan said, "you set yourselves up. You just didn't think anyone was listening." And then another door opened. Jasmine stepped in, small, steady, holding a social worker's hand. Marcus blinked. "Who the hell is that?" Jasmine walked to the table, looked up at him and said, "Hi, Mr. Marcus. Remember me? I was under your desk last night when you called Mr. Yamamoto and said you were going to steal Mr. Jonathan's company." The room went silent, not a breath, not a movement, just the weight of the truth crashing down like a collapsing building. Diana tried to speak. "A child, you're going to believe a street kid over us." Gabriel pulled out his phone, pressed play. And there it was, Jasmine's voice, recorded the night before, clear and curt. "They said you're very stupid and you're going to sign some papers without reading them properly." The blonde woman laughed and said that the day after tomorrow you'll have to look for another job. The final nail, the moment the mask fell, Marcus slammed his fist on the table. "You set us up." "No," Jonathan said, standing slowly, adjusting his tie. "You did that yourself. I just made sure the world saw it." One of the investigators stepped forward. "Marcus Williams, Diana Foster, you're under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit corporate fraud." As the handcuffs clicked, Marcus turned to Jonathan, face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, I'll destroy you." Jonathan met his gaze, calm, unshaken. "You already tried," he said. "The difference is I'm better at it than you are." Diana said nothing, just cried, quietly, shamefully. And as they were led away, Jonathan exhaled, long, deep, like a man finally free of a burden he hadn't even known he was carrying. Jasmine walked up to him, tugged his hand. "Are they really going to jail?" "Yes," he said, "for a long time." Gabriel closed his briefcase, a rare smile on his face. The Japanese canceled the meeting when they heard, but 3 other companies have already called, legitimate ones, interested in real partnerships. Jonathan nodded. His company wasn't broken. It was free, no more parasites, no more lies, just truth, just strength, just him. Later, as the room emptied, Jonathan stood by the window watching the police van pull away. Jasmine stood beside him. "Are you sad?" she asked. He looked down at her. "No," he said. "For the first time in years, I'm at peace." "Why?" "Because I learned something," he said, "that there are people in this world like you, people who do the right thing even when there's nothing in it for them." She smiled, small, quiet. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in the company, not just in the story. In him. 6 months passed. Miller Industries grew 40%. Marcus was sentenced to 12 years. Diana 8. Their assets seized. Their lives dismantled. Gabriel stayed on not as an investigator but as chief of security. A man who had been wronged, now standing guard over justice. And Jasmine, Jonathan had enrolled her in a private school. New clothes, new backpack, new life. One afternoon, she ran into his office waving a paper. "I got an A on my math test." He grinned. "I knew you could." Gabriel watched them, arms crossed, smiling. "Still surreal," he said. "A 7-year-old saved a $200 million company." Jonathan paused. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out a folder. "There's something I haven't told either of you," he said. Jasmine looked up. "Your grandmother," Jonathan said. "What was her name?" "Josephine Miller." Jonathan opened the folder. Birth certificates, old photos, genealogical records. "Josephine was my cousin," he said. "My father's brother's daughter. We lost contact over 30 years ago." Silence. Jasmine looked from the documents to Jonathan. "That means we're family," he said softly. Her eyes filled. And then she ran to him, arms wide, and hugged him like she had known him her whole life. Because in a way she had, not by blood, but by instinct, by love. By the kind of bond that doesn't need paperwork to exist. 3 months later, in the same courthouse where Marcus and Diana had been convicted, Jasmine Miller was officially adopted. She wore a light blue dress, held Jonathan's hand, stood tall. The judge smiled. "It's rare," he said, "to see a story that begins with crime and ends with a family reunited." At the celebration dinner, Jasmine looked at Jonathan, "No, Dad," and asked, "Do you think Grandma knew this was going to happen?" Jonathan thought about it, the timing, the chance, the way she had appeared in his car at exactly the right moment. "I think," he said, "she knew a lot more than we realize, and I think she'd be proud." 1 year later, Jonathan received 2 letters. Marcus from prison, a weak apology, a claim of misunderstanding. Diana, also from prison, blaming Marcus, playing the victim. Jonathan didn't finish reading either. He tore them up. Jasmine watched the pieces fall into the trash. "They still don't get it," she said. "What don't they get?" "It's not about forgiving," she said. "It's about moving on and being better." Jonathan looked at her, and once again he was reminded wisdom doesn't come from age, it comes from heart. 5 years passed. Miller Industries became one of the top 100 tech companies in the country. Jonathan launched a scholarship program for vulnerable children, housing, education, mentorship. Over 200 kids a year. Jasmine, now 12, was its honorary president. At the program's anniversary dinner, someone asked her, "What was the best day of your life?" She didn't hesitate. "The day I got in your car," she said, looking at Jonathan. "Because that day I wasn't just saving your company, I was saving our family." Jonathan smiled. They had tried to take everything from him, but in the end their betrayal had given him the greatest gift of his life. Not revenge, not victory, a daughter, a purpose. And the unshakable truth that sometimes, the universe doesn't send heroes in capes. It sends them in dirty clothes with quiet voices and hearts too big for their age. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage comes in all sizes, that family isn't always blood, and that the most powerful revenge is building something beautiful from the ruins, then do one thing: stay, because there are more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, of unexpected allies, of people who did the right thing when no one was watching. And if you believe in those stories, then you already know the truth. The world isn't changed by the loudest voices. It's changed by the ones who whisper and mean it. There's a moment, just one quiet moment when everything changes. Not with a roar, not with a headline, not with sirens or shouting or the slam of a gavel, but with a whisper, a child's voice in the back seat of a car, a decision to speak up when staying silent would have been safer. A choice to trust someone who had every reason to look away. That moment, that single, unremarkable second, can ripple outward like a stone dropped into still water. It can shatter lies, rebuild lives, mend broken bloodlines, turn a man who thought he'd lost everything into a father who finally found what he never knew he was missing. And that's what this story is really about. Not betrayal, not revenge, not even justice. It's about connection. About the invisible threads that tie us, threads we don't see until they're pulled taut by crisis. Jonathan Miller didn't save Jasmine, and Jasmine didn't save Jonathan. They saved each other without knowing it, without planning it, just by doing what felt right even when it made no sense. That's the truth no corporate report will ever capture, no spreadsheet can measure, no boardroom strategy can predict. Humanity doesn't run on logic, it runs on courage, on instinct. On the quiet voice inside that says, "This isn't right, I have to do something." And sometimes that voice comes from a 7-year-old girl hiding under a desk, listening to monsters talk about destroying a man she's never met. And sometimes that man is her family, not because of a last name, not because of DNA, but because something deeper recognized something deeper, like calls to like, heart to heart, soul to soul. Think about the people in your life. The ones who showed up when you didn't expect them. The ones who said the right thing at the exact moment you were about to give up. The ones who didn't have to care but did. They weren't always loud. They weren't always noticed, but they were there, and because of them you kept going. That's the power of one person choosing to see another. Not as a stranger, not as a problem, not as someone beneath their attention, but as someone worth helping, worth protecting, worth believing in. Jasmine didn't see Jonathan as a CEO. She saw him as a man being lied to, being used, being stripped of everything he'd built, and she couldn't stay quiet, because her grandmother taught her that when you see someone getting stepped on and you can help, you help. Not because you'll be thanked, not because you'll be rewarded, but because it's who you are. And that kind of courage, it doesn't come from privilege, it doesn't come from power, it comes from love, from being loved even in the hardest times. From being taught that your voice matters even if it's small, even if no one's listening, especially when no one's listening. Now think about this, what would have happened if Jasmine hadn't spoken up, if she'd stayed silent, if she'd believed what the world often tells kids like her, you don't matter, you're not supposed to be here, no one will believe you. Jonathan would have signed those papers, he would have lost his company, his life's work, his identity. Marcus and Diana would have walked away rich, laughing, already planning their next victim. And Jasmine, she'd have gone back to the streets, to shelters, to invisibility, but she didn't stay silent, and because of that one act, small, risky, human, everything changed, not just for Jonathan, not just for her, for hundreds of children who now have scholarships, for employees who kept their jobs. For a company that didn't just survive, but thrived because it was finally free of the poison that had been feeding on it. One voice, one choice, one moment of courage, that's all it takes, and that's why this story matters. Because it's not just about a CEO and a little girl, it's about you. About the moment you decide to speak up, to help, to believe in someone when no one else does. To trust that even if you're small, even if you're young, even if you've been knocked down 100 times, your voice still has power, your heart still has strength, and your actions can change the course of someone's life without you even knowing it. Jonathan didn't set out to adopt a daughter that night. Jasmine didn't plan to save a company. They just did what felt right, and in doing so they found each other. They found family, not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose, the kind that chooses you. And isn't that what we all want? To be seen, to be valued, to belong, not because of what we have, not because of our title or our bank account or our last name, but because of who we are, because we care, because we show up, because we try. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that you don't need to be rich, famous, or powerful to make a difference, then do one thing: stay. Because this isn't the only story like this. There are more. Stories of single mothers working 3 jobs who still find time to mentor a struggling teen. Stories of veterans who start programs for homeless youth because no one helped them when they came back. Stories of teachers who pay for their students food out of pocket. Of strangers who jump into rivers to save people they've never met. Of kids who stand up to bullies even when they're shaking. These aren't feel-good moments. They're proof that kindness isn't weakness, that compassion isn't naive. That doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is the strongest thing you can do. And if you believe that, if you've ever been the person who helped or the person who was helped, then you already know the truth. The world isn't saved by superheroes. It's saved by ordinary people making extraordinary choices. And you might be one of them. You might already have been. So don't underestimate your own story. Don't dismiss your own courage. Because the next time someone needs a voice, it might be yours they hear. And if this story reminded you of that, if it made you feel something real, then do me a favor. Click subscribe, not for me, not for this channel, but for the next person who needs to hear this. The one who's sitting in the dark thinking no one sees them. The one who's about to give up. The one who needs to know that one small act of courage can change everything. Because now you know the truth, and the world needs more people who know it. Stay, listen, believe. And when the moment comes, speak up. Because someone's life might depend on it. You never know when a whisper will change the world. It might come from a child hiding in the back seat of a car, from a stranger who hands you a coffee on the worst day of your life, from someone who says, "I believe in you," when you've stopped believing in yourself. Courage doesn't always roar. Hope doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just speaks up when everyone else stays quiet. And if that voice helped someone like Jonathan, if it saved a company, a life, a family, then maybe, just maybe, it's already inside you, waiting, ready, worth hearing. So the next time you see something wrong, the next time you feel that pull in your chest, don't ignore it, because the world doesn't need more spectators. It needs you to say something, to do something, to be someone's quiet turning point. And if this story reminded you of that truth, don't just walk away. Stay, subscribe. Be the reason someone else finds the courage to speak up too. Because the most powerful stories are the ones that start with a single voice and end with 1,000 people saying, "Me too." Thank you for watching. And never underestimate the difference you can make.